Now let's go back into LeetCode, and I've already pasted our new optimized solution into the question space. But the thing to remember here with LeetCode is that when we submit, we are probably going to get some weird results. Let's just see. So here we see that our runtime is 52 milliseconds, which is pretty good because it's better than 92.47% of everyone else that's submitted in JavaScript for this question. But you'll see that our memory usage is pretty bad. And the reason for this memory usage is because of this on line 10, where we set a separate value equal to the nums map, nums at p. What we did here on line 10 is a best practice, or at least it's a better practice because it's much more legible. We're much more aware of what the code is doing. This is not going to dock you any points in the interview. For example, we know that all we're doing is we're caching it and then we're just putting it in these two places. This really only has a space complexity of O of 1 because it's one constant that's getting set for every loop in our for loop. That doesn't actually accumulate any additional memory if our nums increases. As you remember when we talked about scalability in Big O, the only time this matters is if this is actually something that gets larger as our nums gets larger. But that doesn't in this case because this is one set value that just gets set every time in a different loop, but it's not like it consumes more memory. So as an example, let's get rid of this and just replace anywhere that we were using current map val with that nums map, nums at p. Now you'll see that when we submit, our memory improves drastically. Now you might wonder, why did our runtime go up? This is just something on LeetCode side. If we submit again, we'll actually see that the runtime improves. So this is a thing with LeetCode. You might have to submit multiple times to get a better idea of where your code ranks. Honestly speaking, I would not worry too much about these percentages. As long as you're above 70-80%, you're in the clear. When you're in an interview setting, with a lot of what you write, it's not going to be the most optimal code because the most optimal code is not fully legible. So just keep in mind that as long as your performance is pretty good, you're in a pretty good place. So that's all we're going to talk about when it comes to LeetCode and the nuances with it. But the big thing to remember here is it's always good to run your code in LeetCode because LeetCode runs a bunch of test cases that maybe we didn't have. They sometimes run 20, 30, 40, 50 different test cases to make sure that our code is the most optimal it can be. So this is a good way to do some of these questions in LeetCode if you can. Alternatively, it doesn't really matter that much for you to do this step. I've included the link to the code that we've written as well as the actual LeetCode question in your resources. But this process that we've learned, this framework, is the most important thing as far as this interview process goes. So we're going to apply this framework to all of the different questions that we're going to cover in this course while we learn new data structures or algorithms. So remember this process and practice this process. So with that, let's move on to the next question.